Hello, Precious to Purpose family. This is your girl, your sister Salome. Welcome back to the show. I hope you are doing well, you and your family. I just want to say thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to tune in weekly to our discussion. I pray that everything that we're saying, or even some of what we're saying, that you are able to glean from it, learn from it, and apply it. But as always, I would like for you to subscribe to this channel. Yes, subscribe, like, and share. Go ahead and be a blessing to somebody else, right? Yeah, let them know that we are having conversations that will positively impact their lives, and we want them to be a part of it. So, well, I am really excited about this week's discussion as we're entering into our relationship series. Listen, there's also a process in relationship, and we have touched on a few topics where we've had one of my guests come and talk about staying committed, how she was just so committed to her husband, even though he went through, health situations and lost his side. And then I had my amazing husband come on, and we talked about staying committed. What does that mean to stay committed? And with us today is my wonderful guest that will be sharing on a topic that I hope you like it. I pray. But it is an interesting topic about Boaz and Jacob. Why are we always talking about Boaz? Boaz, Boaz, Boaz. What happened to the other characters in the Bible that were so good, even though they had a process, right? And so, without further ado, I want to welcome my guest, Rena Allen, who will be sharing with us about this topic. Renee is my girl, my sister, and I just love her immensely. And I just want to welcome you. Let's just get to it. Welcome, Renee. How are you doing? And welcome to the show.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Salami, for having me on your show. I'm just so ecstatic. And yes, I love you too. And thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing, and just inviting me on your show to be a guest speaker. I'm just really excited on what God is going to do during this time.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this conversation. And by the way, this is a part one, because Renee and I have been talking and dialoguing about this. And let me tell you, Renee went into it really deep. And then when she started talking to me, I was like, oh my goodness, Renee, this looked like a part two too. So I'm excited to see where this goes. But I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, Renee.
Yes, my name is Rena Allen. I am an evangelist. I am a community organizer. I'm very heavily into politics. Some of the things I do out in the community causes me to speak truth to power that's in the government seats. I love feeding the homelessness. I love feeding those that have experienced trauma in some sort of way. My call to evangelism has, we know it goes outside of the four walls of the church. And so I'm one of those women that I don't have to be in the pulpit. I'd rather go outside of the four walls of the church and meet the people right where they are at. And I like to call when I, teach on and, with my ministry, I love to call it Let's Go Fishing. Because that's what we're actually doing. We're going to fish and we never know what we're gonna catch, so I'll be real excited about that. I'm a mother. Yes, I've been divorced. I'm a grandmother. I'm still struggling with that one. I'm a grandmother. Yes, and these are all the amazing things I guess I do right now. So
I'm still getting over the grandmother part, because you do not look like it, but praise God. Amen. I think it's the glory of the Lord.
yes, yes,
So,
yes, yes.
so Renee, this topic about Boaz, I remember in our previous conversations, we shared there was a season where all you could hear is my Boaz. Boaz,
Yes.
Boaz, Boaz.
Yes.
And everybody wanted, and every single person wanted a Boaz. And so I was so intrigued because I'm like, what is with this Boaz thing? Because I remember reading about Boaz, and there's really not much about him, right? But
Mhm.
everybody wanted a Boaz, and I want you to give them a backstory about Boaz. We go forward because I'm relying on you. I know I'm going to be gleaning and learning a lot in this conversation. So go ahead and just share a little bit about Boaz from your perspective.
Well, first, let me say, Salome, I, like you, for years, I would hear every woman wanted a Boaz. And I was just like you on the inside, like, why every woman want a Boaz, you know? And I knew I had read about Boaz, and I knew Boaz was rich, and that when he chose Ruth, that, you know, she was working and things like that. But for some reason, I was just like, why does everybody want a Boaz? And so, even when we talk about Boaz, we have to make sure that we're continuing as a woman, man or woman, you know, that we're continuing to work on ourselves to get the mate that God has for us. But the backstory to Boaz, I'm looking at my notes, so sorry, and making
It's
sure
all
that
right.
I make sure I do every, hit every point,
Yeah.
so that people of God can, make sure that they catch it. Boaz, I even went to look at what his name means. Boaz means swiftness, and which is strength is within him. And so, even as I looked at his name, I said, okay, I can see that strength that is within him. Boaz is considered a hero, and in his dealings with other people, he always was sensitive to their needs. His words to his employees, relatives, and other were colored with kindness. He offered help openly, not grudgingly. And so we have to remember, anytime we're helping someone, we can't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. And it's good when we get unexpected gifts, in the moment, or when someone, just so happens, like you and I, sending a text and say, hey, good morning. I hope that you're, having a good day, or something like that. That lets me know that I'm on your mind. And that's the way that I look at Boaz. But also, when Boaz discovered Ruth, he took several steps to help her, because she had been faithful to his relative Naomi. And when Naomi advised Ruth to request Boaz protection, he was ready to marry her if the legal complications could be worked out. Boaz did what was right. He was always a man of integrity. He did what was right, and he could not foresee all his actions, what he could accomplish. He could not have known that the child he would have by Ruth would be an ancestor of both David and Jesus. And I was like, oh wow, okay, I can see why they considered Boaz. He met the challenge of taking the right action, that the situation that was facing him. And so with Boaz, strength and accomplishments, he was a man of his word. He was sensitive to those in need. He was caring for his workers. He had a keen sense of responsibility, and as I mentioned before, he had integrity. He was also successful and a shrewd businessman. He could be heroic to what must be done and to do it right. God often used little decisions to carry out his big plan. And can you imagine how something like, even with you having your radio
Yeah.
station, and something, it may seem little, but God has a bigger plan even for you, with
Yeah.
your radio station, your book, and all of those things. And that's the way that I look at, Boaz. And his occupation was wealthy and farmer. And he was a farmer. So with that being said, still, why do we want a Boaz?
You know what? You know what? I'm hearing all of those things, and I don't want to say, like say people's intentions are not pure, but they're
Exactly.
always just like ascribe Boaz to just this rich man, like this accomplished man. And I have not heard or read of anything that, he went through a process. Okay, let me just be plain about this. Um, I don't like cookie cutter. I'm not a cookie cutter. Like the alarm will go off for me if you come off too cookie cutter, like you have it all together. What's wrong? What happened? What did you go through? What's your process like? And so that's one of the reasons why we kind of chose Jacob, because Jacob had a process. And so, and he didn't come off as though, oh, well, I'm just the savior, and I want to take care of you and my wife and my children and all that stuff and be this protector. He went through something, and there's something to that effect for me when someone has gone through something. It shows some sort of depth,
Hmm.
instead of just looking like I'm just the savior and this prince. Women, or we were raised thinking about that. When we grow up, we're going to get our Prince Charming. We're going to ride off in the sunset. And I think of Boaz as that kind of a person. But I feel like there's a catch to it, don't you think?
Even as you were saying, I'm glad you left it back on Boaz, because even with Boaz, even in our discussion, we have to remember Boaz was old.
Very.
So, and Ruth was a young woman. Don't get me wrong, you got some women who like the older men, but you got to take in consideration there's other things that go with dating or marrying an old man, right? And so he was old. And then they really didn't get to enjoy life. Even though she got pregnant, they really didn't get to enjoy life, because if you think about it, his story was so short. You don't read for, I mean, we don't read further on that they enjoyed life. It's almost like she became a single parent, because he died instantly after they got married. Some say it was the next day that she died. He died. Boaz
Mhm.
died. So when we talk about companionship, or even
Long term.
that's what I was going to say, a long-term relationship, these are things that we really got to consider: the health of the mate. Like, so do we get to live and be able to tell our, not only our children, but our our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, are those going to be stories? So even when we talk about Boaz, we, like you said, he was almost like the rider on the white horse. He was the Prince Charming, and he's coming to, swipe me off of my foot. But then there's nothing else. It didn't show, it didn't tell. I mean, yes, he was very respectful. He was very respectful. He had integrity. But then even with Boaz, did he love? You know, did was he a praying man? I mean, these are other questions that we have to ask when we're choosing a mate, especially, men and women. These are things. And as I was reading on Boaz, I didn't see any of those things. And so oftentimes I think everybody wants to date a Boaz because he's rich. And even one of our discussions, and hopefully I'm not jumping ahead, you asked the question, like, so what if we take, a woman who has been abusive all of her life and lived in poverty and been raped, and but all she wants is to be rich. And I said, well, you know what? I can kind of understand that a little bit, because what happens is, and when I say this, I'm not trying to be funny or biased or anything like that, or show that I'm prejudiced, but we have to look at race at this point, right? Because white girls, and as I pointed out to you, let's go back, like, for instance, the Netflix movie, I think it was called Pinkerton or something like that.
Was it Bridget something?
Bridgerton or something. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Bridgerton. And so even in that Netflix movie, these little, once the young ladies got their period, they were considered a woman. Just like we being, black little girls, once we got our period, we was considered a woman. And so with that being said, as being a, white girl, they were groomed to marry a rich man. And so when I think about Bridgerton, the Netflix movie, it was almost like a Boaz. You
Yeah.
got to work. Their mothers was sitting up there grooming them, and didn't matter how old they were. One of the characters was like, one of the young ladies was like, I'm not I don't like him. He's not attractive. You know, he had missing tooth and everything. But at all costs, in this movie, and even back then, they were trained to marry a rich man. They were trained to marry a man that have 401k stocks and bonds
Yeah.
and things like that. And then, so when you talk about the woman who hasn't experienced it, you know, that doesn't have that luxury, is like, okay, so why not go for the rich man? I tried love, so why not go for the rich man at this point?
I know. And then you also have like as you alluded to the fact that you were raised in an environment where your mom was poor, your papa was
Mm-hmm.
poor, your family was poor, and you're trying to break that. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is the way that I can do that. Let me go get somebody who's able to help me and my family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so we have that scenario too, but at the same time, first and foremost, what is the purpose of us getting married? Right? What is, or what should be the true purpose of us getting married? Are we just getting married for money, for status, or we're getting married for love, and that we want to just replicate what God has asked us to do on earth as a married couple? And so when I look at Boaz, I remember hearing that name so often. Everybody was, oh, this is my Boaz, my Boaz. Like, come on. And I was so curious. So that's why we kind of landed with this conversation. Like, where's my Boaz? But as we chose Jacob. Obviously, there are so many other men in the Bible that we have seen them go through process and transition. Like they started out one thing, and then their divine encounter allowed them to change, and God changed them into really figures that we can truly say, you know what, I have seen myself some at some point in their lives, and how God can change our situations. And that's just how I am. That's just
Mm-hmm.
me. And I think Jacob was a good one. And we talk about Jacob, and I'll let you share about Jacob too. But Jacob was not always Jacob,
Mm-mm.
right? Well, actually, his name was changed from
Mm.
Jacob to Israel. So I want to give you the opportunity to just share with us about Jacob as well.
Yes. To Jacob's story, there, you know, Jacob had four stages of his life. And so even when we talk about choosing a mate, I do think people get married for different reasons. I remember an older lady, I guess she had been dating men younger than her. And I remember she said that she had to come out of the sandbox. And I thought it was funny. She said, I had to go get someone with some AARP, some pension. And so she decided to date older. You got some women or men that marry for love. You got some men or women that marry for money. Even for myself, you know, I would say that I married for love, but at the same time, I knew because of all the things that I had been through in my past that I needed my ex-husband more so than he needed me. And so with him coming into my life, he gave me stability. And so you know, even now that we're divorced, we're actually like the best of friends. Not to sit up and say that you know, we're better off being friends than married. It just came to a place where it seemed like, okay, we wasn't growing together, if that makes sense. But one of my things with that being said is that when we talk about choosing a mate, I think you know, we have to know what it is that we want, and make sure that it's ordained by God, first and foremost. And so as we take a look at Jacob, and I must say, I'm a big fan of Jacob,
Right.
because I like the fact of all the things
No,
that
that's
he
your boo.
through. Yeah, I will say he's my boy. He's my boy. But just looking at Jacob, you know, Jacob lived up to his name, right? And so Jacob name means he's a schemer, he's a cheater, he is one who grabs from behind by the heel. Because even in the womb of their mother Rebecca, the Rebecca had to go to God, and she said she had to inquire of God, and because she didn't know what was going on in her womb, because both babies were jostling one another. And God speaks to Rebecca, and it's in Genesis 26 and 23. The Lord said to her, two nations are in your womb, and two people from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve the younger son. And so even as that process, when she began to give birth to Jacob and Esau, the first to come out, which was Esau, he was red and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau for that reason. But then Jacob came out, but as Esau was coming out, he was trying to grab him from from his heel. And so right there, that begins Jacob's journey in life. And even when I think about the birth, we have to go to the scripture when he sits up there and says, I knew you when you was being formed in your mother's womb. And so that lets us know that he actually has a plan for us and who we are. And so even as I go to talk, continue to search through Jacob's life, Jacob, he lived up to his name. Everything Jacob did. And how many of us can relate to that? Because I can relate to it a little bit. Not that I was a schemer or anything like that, but I know that I was disobedient. I've been, rebellious, and which I had to find out rebellious was a sin as well. And so all these names to Jacob translated to being backstabbing, sneaky, conniving, and Jacob can also be known for clipping as well. And so even when it came time to get the blessing, their father Isaac was going to give the blessing to Esau. And so we have to remember, Isaac in verse 21 went to the Lord and he spoke to the Lord. And when he spoke to the Lord, he just told, next thing he know, Rebecca gets pregnant, because he went to the Lord and said, okay, Lord, I'm just paraphrasing right now. She needs to get pregnant. And so Rebecca ends up pregnant. But only then, this is what was a revelation to me. When Isaac was getting ready to give the blessing to Esau, Rebecca just so happened to be listening. And
it was in the bloodline.
Say that again.
It was in the bloodline.
Exactly. And so even when and at first when I read it years ago, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, they were so wrong for that. And I was thinking Rebecca, the mama, was sitting up there, showing favoritism to the kids, to the twin. But after we got to really reading it again, I said, no, she wasn't showing favoritism. See, I had to go back and remember at the beginning, she said, God spoke and said, two nations. The older brother is going to serve the younger brother. And then Isaac, he only spoke to Isaac and said she'd get pregnant. He didn't give him further instructions. So even with that being said, that was another stage to Jacob. And so even out of that, that's when Isaac gave the blessing to Jacob. Esau got mad, found out about it, and he had to leave town. But we also have to remember that Jacob methods were not always respectable. His skill, determination, and patience, all of these things must be admired. And even when you talk about the bloodline, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are among the most significant people in the Old Testament. It is important to realize that this significance is not based upon their personal characters, but on the character of God. They were all men who earned the grudging respect and even fear of their peers. They were wealthy and very powerful, and yet each one was capable of lying, deceit, and selfishness. They were not the perfect heroes we might have expected. Instead, they were just like us, trying to please God, but often falling short. But Jacob had, wait a minute, do I need to slow down? You got any questions for me?
You know what? No, go ahead. Well, you know what? Let me say this. And I talk about the bloodline. Like I think sometimes even when we talk about relationships, even we're also taught like, if you're going to get married to someone, not only about their money and whatnot, but what about their families? Are they good families? We're asked, find out if the parents are married. How did they grow up? Where did they go? Did they go to school? Are they educated? And so those are the questions that we ask. And now I think, even though we've been hearing about Boaz, 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 and not Jake, the a Jacob. I think these are some of the things that people, they think about. Like, I don't want to have to deal with the drama. I don't want to have to deal with the history of the family, or all of that extra stuff. So let me just go with what I see right here. He's good. He can provide. He's intelligent. He has a doctorate. He's got money. He got his own business. Why not? Right. And so we don't go to that because this is how we were raised, our culture or norm, the things that have been spoken in our lives, and just the changes that we want to see as we evolve. So even though we've heard about like Boaz, 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 and nobody has been talking about like a Jacob, which, not when I say a Jacob, not necessarily Jacob, but somebody who has been through something, that you hear about those process. Because I mean, I'm happily married now, but if I should say, if going out meeting someone, if I wasn't married, and they come across like, oh, I'm a provider, they're giving all their credentials and this is what I've done, whatnot, uh, something goes off. I'm like, okay, all right, well, that's good. But what's behind it? What have you gone through? What is it that you're not sharing with me? If it's too cookie cutter, that's not me. You know what I mean? And so that's why we choose Jacob, because we wanted to kind of see someone who had gone through something, but at the same time, when we look at them how they are now, we can say, wow, they're not the same person. And so I can deal. These are some of the things that I can put up with because God has changed them. And so I
Mhm.
want you to continue. But yeah, that was just my thought as you were going through it. Like, you know what? Yeah, I see Jacob, and I see, and even the things that we speak over our children, that came out to me. But then that's a whole nother story about you, the things that you talk about, you speak over your children, even your unborn children, they will come to pass now, because words are very powerful.
Mhm.
Words are
Mhm.
very powerful.
Exactly, exactly. And even as you talk about it being on the dating, having to date, um, and when something come off to, they're not being honest, like some women, right? And I have to, take this personal, because I have a few single friends, and sometimes I'll be like, oh my God, they're
Mhm.
like, they ain't gonna never find anybody, because they're not allowing themselves to be like open, right? And so, and I say that because if we take a Boaz,
Mhm.
you'll get a woman say, okay, I know there's something else to him, he just not telling me. But there may not be nothing else to him. That may be just what it is. But then if you get someone that's, that can be rich and wealthy, like Jacob, but he's a little raggedy on the edge, right? But then you have those women that would judge him like Jacob for his past.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so which one do you want? Would at least he came to you open and honest and said, hey, I've been to prison. Hey, now, and let me say this. I'm not sitting up here saying you should accept everything and
Yeah.
anything. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all, because even having to date, I've had to let go. I found out some things by just doing my own research, and I was like, no, that's one that I cannot deal with, right? That's one. And I do realize that we have to use wisdom, and the wisdom of God through this process. And even when we're choosing a mate, I do think that is very important that we get on our knees and pray to God and ask God, okay, so what role are they supposed to play? Where am
Mhm.
I supposed to place them? And not all the time, and I tell women this too, not all the time is each man meant to be in your life to be a husband. Sometimes they're just there to be a friend, or
Yeah.
that's it. Just to have conversation with, like one of your girlfriends or something like that, because I'm able to have those types of relationships.
Mhm.
And so not every man that I meet or I have met that I set up and say, okay, you know what, he's my husband and I want to get to know him. No, no.
They can
And
teach you
there's
something too. They
say
teach you
that
some things too.
exactly. And what's that saying go where they sit up there and say some people in our life to play for a season, a reason, and a lifetime.
Lifetime.
And to me, you have to separate those things. Maybe it's just a matter of just saying, hey, maybe you got the connection to them for a job. Maybe you got the connect because I played, and the reason why I say that is because I played these parts. And afterwards have men came back and said, can I take your dinner? I'd be like, nope, nope. I felt like my season has been up. And I'm going to be transparent again. And this is my authentic transparency. Even when I mention about praying for the spouse, I've been in a situation where I've gotten a ring, right? I've gotten a ring, was about to play, playing for the wedding. But for whatever reason, I got on my knees again. I said, Lord, show me if I'm supposed to finish planning this wedding or not. Show me. And don't show me years later, but I need you to show me as if I putting some, I don't eat oatmeal, but I know about instant oatmeal in the microwave, right? And let me tell you, honey, let me tell you, God begins to unravel some things for me. Next thing I know, I was stopping everything. That wasn't the man for me because everything that I had built here where I live at, that man was trying to take it from me, but came in disguise. It was a wool and cheap clothing. And anytime you have to choose between ministry and a mate, I'm going to choose God and ministry all day long because I
Yeah.
know who has helped me. And so we have, when we're praying and we are choosing a mate, we really do have to seek God in everything, and I strongly believe that, and I'm not taking that back.
I absolutely believe that we have to make it a matter of prayer because we sometimes we don't know what we're doing, and we need
Mhm.
to. I mean, we never know what we're doing. We have to
Mhm.
rely on God to do that. And some people will say, "Oh, well, we got to pray about a husband." Like you have eyes to see. What is it that you want? But you need God for direction. He's not going to say, listen, he's not going to say, well, so this is me personally. I don't think God is not choosing our mates for us. This is just
Mm-mm.
me personally. He gives us a choice. He gives us the instructions. He gives us the tool. And you better get on the knees and pray and ask God for direction so he can help to guide you along. It's not to say that you're not going to use wisdom because the same instruction that God has given you is to use wisdom also.
Exactly.
So if you're poor and you're going to get married to somebody who's poor, you have to have the mindset that you're going to be struggling for a minute, right? So
Exactly.
so you want to look in the direction of at least and I don't even want to say potential because I hear you talk about not potential but purpose, right? And he has those capabilities to go out there to provide, be a provider, a man of integrity. He loves to work, right? He's loving. He
Exactly.
has a sensitive side because sometimes you got these men, they're so rough and tough, and you don't get anything from them. And they can give you a wedding, they can give you the event. They can make you feel good that day. But after that day, like Boaz
That's
and, and,
exactly.
and, and a baby, and then after that, they're nowhere to be found. And so,
Exactly.
what is it that you want long term for your children and your children's children? And that is the reason why we came on today for the audience that we want to share with you that you have to take into consideration the total man, the total man,
Exactly.
spiritually, physically, listen,
Mentally.
mentally, emotionally, and financially. Okay,
Financially.
because you need somebody who you can build with. You know
Mhm.
that. Okay, some people. they would prefer living in the same one bedroom that they were raised in, or they were single in for the rest of their lives. No, we're going to raise children, so we want to have two, three bedrooms or buy a house. So you have to deal with, or find someone who has that mentality not to stay where they are. Like Jacob didn't stay where he was, right?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
He
Mm-mm.
became a better man. Even though he started
Mm-hmm.
out this way, he became a better man, and he was a provider, and he was rich too. He was
Mm-hmm.
rich then, but he accumulated the riches because of the promise that God gave him. But I do believe that we have a choice, and it is our responsibility to make the best choice for ourselves. And I'm just going to say that.
And I totally agree with you saying that, and even when you said potential, but potential also leads to purpose. It's the bigger plan, and even as we were talking, and I want to make sure that I make this point, even as we look at Jacob's life, right? And I've always heard the saying, "You don't marry for now, but you marry for the future." And the reason why you marry for the future, like you said, because there is a purpose. And even as we look at Jacob's life, there was continuous growth.
Yeah,
And like I mentioned earlier, there was 4 stages to Jacob's life, but each stage was marked by a personal encounter with God. Jacob lived up to his name. He grasped the heel. He deceived. He grabbed Esau's heel at birth, and by that time he fled from home. He had also grabbed his brother's birthright and blessing. And during his flight, God first appeared to him. Not only did God confirm to Jacob his blessing, but he awakened in Jacob a personal knowledge of himself. That was step one. Jacob experienced life from the other side, being manipulated and deceived by Laban. But here is a curious change. In the first stage of life, Jacob would have left Laban, whereas the Jacob of stage 2, after deciding to leave, waited 6 years for God permission. And let me touch on step 2 a little bit, because we have to remember, after Jacob stole the birthright of his, I don't want to say stole, but he got the birthright from his father. He fled to his uncle's Laban's. And out of that, he noticed a woman by the name of Jacob. And when he noticed her, he loved Jacob. I mean, not Jacob, Rachel. I
Rachel.
apologize. He loved Rachel. And so for that, he went to Laban and said, "I will work for you for 7 years so that I can have your daughter's hand in marriage." Now, love at first sight. I want love. I want a man to love me. Now, and when we talk about the character of Jacob, that's what I'm saying. The difference between Jacob and Boaz. We never heard that Boaz said that he loved Ruth. We didn't see that. We didn't see that he was a man of love. But in this process, we see that he loved Rachel. Now, and when we talk about stage 2 of Jacob's life, he worked for her for 7 years, but when he completed, he went back to Laban and basically said, I'm paraphrasing again, "Okay, I want my wife, I done work for you, give me what's due to me," right? We
Right.
all want, I done paid my debt to you, I'm done. Oh, Laban deceived him at this point. Okay, I'm gonna give you what you want, but it's not what you think.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it to you. What'd he do? He gave him Leah instead. And Jacob had been deceived and woke up and was like, wait a minute. That's not who I worked for. That's not who I work for. I work for Rachel. So even with that being said, he said, okay, because he loved Rachel, guess what he did? He worked 7 more
My
years
dear. Sacrifice.
until he got Rachel. And so with that being said, a total of 14 years. If a man works for you, guess what? Because it does say in Proverbs 18:22, he said, when a man findeth a wife, he findeth favor. And and I had to tell my father this not too long ago. I said, men miss that part. They find it the wife, right? And women, we have to know that when a man finds us, it's favor for them, and that's the piece that we often miss. That's the piece that men and women, because not only did you find when God allowed you to find me, I was already a blessing. I was already walking in my authority. I was already attached to my identity, and so when He puts two together that no man can separate it, that only means the man who is the head of your life. Well, the spirit is the head of the man, and then it's the man. And so when we think about that and two comes together, we think about everything that is going to flow from that couple. We think that's the reason why I often think that's how couples were able to stay together for so many years. And I remember being young and working in retail, and I would come across these couples that's been married 30, 40, 50 years, and I would always ask them, was like, so what made you stay married so long? And everybody always had a different reason as to why they stayed married so long. Even now, with me having friends that have been married 20, 30, well, they're all approaching 30, but I just realized I got a couple they're much older than me, but they've been married over 40 years now. But if I ask them what made y'all stay together, it's always something different. But the thing about this is, when we take a look at how Jacob loved his wife and how we take a look at Jacob's life, guess what? They always didn't start out the same. Just like Jacob, these married couples had to grow just like Jacob. That's why it's so important that we just don't marry for just the now, but we marry for the future. And that's the reason, as we pointed out earlier, he got potential, but potential becomes purpose. And that's something that we also have to remember when we are choosing a mate. And so even as I go to continue to look at Jacob's life in the third stage, Jacob was in a new role as a grabber. This time by the Jordan River, he grabbed onto God and wouldn't let go. He realized his dependence on God, who had continued to bless him. His relationship to God became essential to his life, and his name was changed to Israel, and which means he struggled. He struggled.
Yes.
To get what was promised to him. And so even out of that, this becomes, because when we think about Jacob's life, and we think about how he became, how he started out one way, because when we start out one way and then God gets to continue to, do a little thing, he's working in us. And so you think about step 2 and 3, that when Jacob got deceived, he would have cut out and left and said, this ain't worth it. And so not only did God set him up, because he placed Rachel there. He placed Rachel there for the love. But even with him fleeing to Laban's, farm, he still had a plan for Jacob. And it was a plan even that was in his womb. And we can't reiterate that enough. He knows who we are when we was formed in his womb. And then when we look at the fourth stage of Jacob's life, he was to be grabbed. Jacob's last stage of life was to be grabbed. God achieved a firm hold on him. In responding to Joseph's invitation to come to Egypt, Jacob was clearly unwilling to make a move without God's approval. Now, how do we go from not depending on God and we depending on our own resources, we depending on our own self? Now, this just goes to show how Jacob just evolved. He went from being potential, he went to his purpose. And we just think about how, that really blessed me. He would not move. Okay, how do you feel like Jacob? Can you imagine being Rachel and say, okay, Jacob, can we go do this? Or Israel, let me just say this. Let's go back to his new name. Israel, can we do this? Oh, no, let me go sit here. Because, sometimes as women, we want to do things when we want to do it, how we want to do it. where
You
we
preach
want
it.
to do it. We want to override because we're so, we have that type of attitude where we want to get things done. But in Jacob's, because Jacob was her husband, and he was spirit, he was her spirit, she had to listen to the spirit within a man,
Yes,
and that's a whole nother subject.
that's
Because
a
when
whole
we
nother
say follow
story.
man, we talk about the spirit within the man. And so with that being said, Jacob was bound down to his father and said, okay, God, can I make this move? And so when we talk about Jacob evolving, I just love the growth of him. And even as we continue on, Jacob became the father of 12 tribes. And let's think about that. Each tribe represented something. He was the third in the line of God's plan. Abraham, Isaac, and
Yeah.
Jacob. He was willing to work long and hard for what he wanted. He was, guess what? The same attributes that Boaz had.
Yeah.
Jacob was a good
So
businessman.
hold that thought, because you said something that I want to go back to. So you recognize that everything that he was when he was Jacob, um, the similar things happened to him when he was Israel, but it changed because it changes his heart towards God. First and foremost, you mentioned, and I hope I remember my little old man. But anyway, you're talking about him being a trickster, recognizing that even the fact that he worked 7 years for Rachel but didn't get Rachel at that time, and so he had to work again. So listen, he was in his mind. Okay, okay. I could just see Jacob like, okay, well, I did this, so it looks like this is coming back to bite me in the butt. Like, so I had to work 7 additional years, and then you also mentioned him when he was at the river, like when you said that, I just remember when he was grabbing on the heel of his brother to come out. So he was always grabbing, and so even the point where when he wrestled with God and he held on to that, because he didn't want to let go until he got his blessing. I'm just like, every single thing that happened, every little thing that he was, he did when he was younger. Um, Happened to him, but it was in a different way because now he was a new man, right? He was a new man.
Exactly.
And so he's
Exactly.
grabbing on now and he's relying on God. He's not relying on his brother heal so he can go out there and get the blessing. He's actually grabbing onto God so God could bless him, right?
Exactly.
So we see the transition there with the little things that he went through when he was younger, when he was old, or when he was Jacob. And now that he's Israel, he's going through that, but he's relying on God for his blessing. Wow, that was just powerful.
But even with that being said, it just goes to show, even in our faith, how we think like a child, and we thinking, oh, we can do this ourselves and things like that. And even
Hmm.
through this process, Jacob began to depend on God. And one of the big one, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, even in the third stage, what's funny about that whole thing is he got hit in the socket. And so, Jacob walked with a limp thereafter,
Yeah,
and so, but sometimes in life, to get
yeah,
what we got, we won't. We may have to walk with a limp. And
yeah,
even when we choosing a mate, guess what? Along the way, he may have a limp, even as your
yeah.
other guest, the other week in their marriage, the husband became blind, and she still stood by him.
Wow.
And even
Yeah,
out of that, from what I gathered listening to him, it was like, why me, Lord? But then the Lord answered and said, why not
not
you? And
you.
there was still purpose. And from what I gathered from, listening to your other guests, it was still purpose here on earth. Even though he
Yeah,
became blind, it was still purpose in his blindness for his life. And
yeah.
so we have to remember, when we're choosing a mate, so, health. He does, in those vows, he say, to death do us part. And he said
Wow.
sickness and in health. And so even when we choosing, just like Jacob, guess what? He walked away with a limp. He was hit in the hip. And most people that I didn't see that has a hip problem, they walk with a limp, and they in so much pain. But Jacob, Now, let me say, Jacob wrestled. You know, some would say it was God, some would say it was an angel, just depending on what version you listen to. But Jacob wrestled with that, you know, but he was willing to get what
Yeah.
God promised him. And so, just like us, we have to remember not to let go. We have to remember we may have to go through some changes, just like Jacob did. And what he did was change Jacob first.
Yes.
Changed
Yes.
Jacob, and even in his changing, he had to, learn some lessons through his changing, and that's what God has to do with us sometimes, even through life. Whether we're trying, even if our desire is to be married, or even have that job, or even raising children, there we have to remember, don't let go, just like Jacob. And as I was saying before, Jacob occupation, he was a shepherd, he was a livestock owner. And even just going to look at some of the other men that I looked at, Isaiah, he was considered the greatest of the Old Testament as a prophet. He had
Mhm.
powerful messages of both judgment and hope. But his occupation was being a scribe and a prophet. And then my other boy in the Bible is Joshua. He was first, he was an assistant to Moses, and then he became a successor. So
Yes.
even though when we talk about pastoralship, he may start off as an assistant pastor, but guess what? There was training, just like Joshua and Moses. He may step
Yes.
out there and say, okay, you know what? I've been called, and now it's time for me to lead my own flock. And so even with that, he was one of two adults who experienced the Egyptian slavery and lived to enter the promised land.
Yes.
He led the Israelites into their God-given homeland, brilliant military strategist. He was faithful to ask God's direction in the challenges that he faced. And guess what? Again, his occupation, assistant to Moses, he was a warrior, he was a leader. That was another great man of Jacob. And then
Yes.
one other one that I want to point out, Ehud, he's in the book of Judges. He was the
Yes.
second judge of Israel, a man of direct action, a frontline leader. He used a perceived weakness. I didn't realize until I was reading
Wow.
about him, left-handed was considered a
A
weakness.
weakness. Wow.
I didn't know that. And one of my kids is a left-hander. But the crazy part about it is he's probably one of my strongest sons. I'm the mother of three boys. And he was one of the ones to do a great work for God.
Yes.
And he led the revolt against the Moabite denomination and gave Israel 80 years of peace. And guess what? His occupation, messenger and judge. And so when we talk about Boaz, there's other characters in the
So many. There's so many. There's so many more. But I really feel like, I mean, if I'm not on here, I'm having this conversation with anybody. I'm like, you want a Boaz because he rich. You like because he rich, really. But there's so much more. There's so much more. The other day I posted this, like, stop rushing God for your mate. Stop
Mhm.
rushing God for your mate. You must not know what it takes to customize someone who can cover you and complement you, right?
Yeah.
You're not average. Give God the space to do what only He could do. God is customizing your man, okay, your husband, all right? And so don't rush God, and just be very patient. We even Jacob being patient for the one that he loves.
Mm-hmm.
And when women don't settle, do not settle. You don't have to
Exactly.
settle, but you have to be patient, though.
Yes,
You have
Lord.
to be patient, but you have to be wise. And I mean, there's no perfect husband, there's no perfect man. You're just gonna have to say, God, okay, well, I need your help with this,
Exactly.
right? Because when you look at the total man, and most importantly, you need somebody who could cover you in prayer.
Hello.
You need,
Hello.
listen, your husband is the priest of your home. You know what a priest is?
Exactly. Go
You know
ahead.
what a priest is? Can I start preaching here? Because you preached earlier. You know what a priest is? Somebody who can cover you, cover
Yes.
you, cover
Yes.
you. You need somebody who can help you to build that foundation. not only financially, not only having the houses and the cars and the stocks and all that stuff, but somebody who can help you with your raise your children. You know, a lot of times I've seen women who just marry men for their money and they're never there,
Mm-mm,
never
mm-mm,
there.
mm-mm, mm-mm. And I would like to add one more thing. Even when we talk about the covering of a man, I mean, having that covering from our spouse, we have to consider, as I mentioned earlier, we're women nowadays. We're doing so much more. We're no longer sitting in the house making sure that dinner is cooked and we're raising kids. We're actually going out into corporate America. We're leading companies. We even have to consider, even we just got our first vice president as a woman, and even her spouse has to cover her. And I bring that up because we're pastors now, we're prophets now, we're prophetess now, we're an evangelist now, we're music leaders now, we're CEOs now. Like we have the mantle. We carry so much over us, and so it's so important. It is so important for us to have a godly man that is grounded, but
Yes.
yet patient, because we got to get them there too. We got to remember,
Mhm.
we got to get them there. And so, with that being said, to have that covering over our life. And so many of us are looking for a leader, but the leader may be within, and we have to remember we got to be patient with him. So, I'm glad that
Absolutely.
you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely, absolutely. We do so much, and so
Mm-hmm.
we need a man that's able even deal with that as well, right?
And
And
deal with
they
us.
have to be strong. And that part, and that part, because it is a lot. Oh Jesus, I pray for my husband as he prays for me, because it is a lot. But we need somebody who's able to complement us,
Mm-hmm.
and as you shared, it is important for us to pray, young ladies, people who are desiring marriage, to pray. And
Mm-hmm.
also, even for those who are already married, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work that has to be done there as well as you grow and cultivate that environment and that relationship so you can move to the next level,
Exactly.
in your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose can be completed and fulfilled. You know, people just, I know people just married because I just need to have somebody.
Mm-mm. That they're settling, and 9 times out of 10, they're settling and probably unhappy or end up in divorce because
Hmm.
they just decide to settle. And that's another thing with women, because we were groomed that you just get married, or whatnot. And as we get older, like you said, we end up settling because we realize that we would never get the perfect mate, that we're choosing the mate, but we still not patient enough to
Yeah,
allow God to choose our mate. And just because we turn, well, let me say this, because I'm not 50 yet, but um, I just because you turn 40, it doesn't mean that your life is over. Let's just say that. I just believe every time I get up to, teach or preach, especially because I am an evangelist, I always tell them we'll work in process, we'll work in progress. I call it the WIP. And so each and every day we get to work on ourselves. We get to be happy. There's brand new grace and mercy. And being single, there's advantages to being single while you're waiting on your mate. And I clearly say enjoy your life. I,
yeah,
you know, and enjoy your life in your singleness until God sends you your perfect mate.
absolutely. I'm glad you even brought up the age thing too, because I think there's a thing with women as soon as 40 is approaching and we're single. It's like, okay, the clock is ticking, what's happening, and then rush into something prematurely because your clock is ticking. You need to get married right away, and then you make the mistake in just picking up trash instead of being patient for your husband. You can be married at 50. You can be married at 55.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to be I want to be sensitive too, because I know people who are young ladies who are single, and it's hard for them. And I know it's very hard. And I'm with you, and I'm praying for you that God will send the right person for you. They'll say, you sit up there married with your man in your house, even in this winter, and you talk about, I should wait. I get that. I get that. I mean, I tell my husband all the time, especially in the cold time, no, really, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have you. And I share that. And I'm being totally honest. I'm like, I would, I, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah.
Well, let's just
So it's
say
a
this.
process.
Well, I think it gets a lot colder where I'm at than it gets colder where you're at. So I prefer to have your coldness than my coldness. But just being a single woman, I would honestly say yes, it would be nice to have someone on them cold winter nights and things like that. But if I had to speak to that thing, let me tell you, I am happy, because I get to. I mean, it's just me, it'd be just me. I find other things to you know, help keep me happy, or I do other things to, stay happy in those moments. And sometimes I don't want to be bothered. And that's the thing that we have to take in consideration when we so desire a mate, because I like the time. I like the fact that at times I get to come and go and I ain't got to check in with
Yeah.
anybody. When it comes to cooking dinner, I don't have to make sure that dinner is made. I just can go in, and if I want to eat a bowl of cereal for dinner, then that's what I get to do. And like you said earlier, I want to be sensitive to those who wants to be married. And not to say that I don't want to be married. Let me make that clear. Not to say that I don't want to be married, but at the same time, I I am enjoying my singleness. I get to pursue things career wise, where I have found, like, in my dating world, that because, for instance, when I went into politics, I lost a lot of friends and family because I went into politics. And so sometimes you have, when you're choosing a mate, you have to, make sure you're choosing the right mate because God may give you something. And you may want to, you be like, babe, God is giving me this or whatnot, and I feel as though I should pursue it. And so what if the spouse tell you no, not to do it? Just like, Job and his wife, she was talking about him, she went to him like, why you still believing in that God? You know what I'm saying? Like, and so we have to consider those things. Like, you get to accomplish so much more in your, singleness. Not that you can't, accomplish
As a
things
couple.
being
Yeah.
as a couple, because it's more power. It's better to be together than apart. But if you're desiring marriage, I just say continue to do all the things that God has put before you, as in your waiting. That's the best way I can put it. In your waiting, continue to do everything has put before you. Don't become a bump on the log. If he tells you to go back to school, go back to school. That's the way that I've tried, that I live my life. Like, Lord, I don't want to leave this side of the earth without, completing every assignment that you have for me.
Right, right. Wow. Oh my goodness, we've been on here for quite a long while, but it's been a really interesting conversation. I told you that this, yeah, there has to be a part two. I'm so excited because we have two additional guests that will be on next week. So I'm really excited to see, and from a male perspective too. So I'm really excited about that, aren't you?
Yes, yes,
I
yes, yes.
am. Oh my goodness. Why are we talking about this process to purpose, family? Because there is a process. There is a process in our relationships. A process to getting into the relationship and a process during the relationship. And so we're so glad that we were able to glean a little bit from this and just pray. And my encouragement to you is just continue praying and seeking God's face continue to position yourself.
Exactly.
Because even with Boaz, Ruth had to position herself to be
Mhm.
found, right? So don't sit up in your house and say, okay, well, I'm just going to sit and wait on God and just going to pray, go in the prayer room, prayer closet, pray, come out here, and God just go send somebody to knock on you. Well, He might, but you have to position yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Have fun. Enjoy yourself, build up yourself in your most holy faith. So when you come together with what God has placed for you or given you, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is like dynamite. It's going to be so powerful. And you
Right.
yourself can impact lives and change generations and minister to young couples.
Yes.
So position yourself so that your Boaz or your Jacob can find you. Oh my
Yes.
goodness, I am so excited. Thank you so much, Renee. Renee, thank you. You said and preached today. At one point, I was like, okay, preach. Yes, sir. Praise God. Amen.
Well,
So
thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. I will see you. I'll talk to you during the week and I'll see you next week. Hello, and thank you so much. I hope this episode really blessed you all. I hope it really blessed you all. I am so excited that we were able to share with you today. Go ahead, subscribe, like, and share this episode and be a blessing and just sit with your girlfriends or your single friends, your married friends, and just listen to this episode and let us know what you think. Either you inbox us or put a comment. Are you waiting for your Boaz or your Jacob? Are you a cookie cutter? Are you into that? Okay, we'll provide a rich without a process, or are you willing to enjoy someone who have a past and God has really brought them out. But I love you and thank you so much for tuning in, and we're excited for you to be with us next week. Take care. God bless you. Remember, there is a purpose for your process. Bye bye.